Tonight, we continue our reflective journey with Brother Khalil Jaffer, exploring the inner dimensions of the human self, the soul, and the hidden beauty that Allah has placed within each of us. In the second series, Brother Khalil guides us through a deeper understanding of the dual nature of humanity, a key theme in our spiritual awakening. He reminds us that every human being carries two distinct natures: the tabi'ah or physical earthly self that instinctively seeks pleasure, avoids pain, and fights for survival, and fitrah or the higher spiritual self which holds our capacity for virtue, insight, and closeness to Allah. These two natures coexist within us, distinct yet inseparable like the two sides of a coin. Attempts throughout history to suppress the physical self, whether through extreme asceticism, self-punishment, or rigid celibacy, demonstrate that denying our bodily instincts cannot lead to true spiritual growth. Brother Khalil illustrates this with historical examples. Hindu mystics in India who buried themselves or subjected themselves to extreme austerity, former Tamil Tiger combatants in Sri Lanka punishing their bodies to atone for past actions, and Catholic monks embracing celibacy to overcome desire. While these acts are intended to transcend human instincts, they often fail because the physical self cannot simply be eradicated. It must be understood, guided, and harmonized with the spiritual self.
What we want to do tonight is talk about the characteristics of tabi'ah and fitrah, so that we begin to understand this in greater detail. When we begin saying that we have two distinct natures, we have tabi'ah and we have fitrah, our minds will immediately begin to suggest that these two are separate entities and I can choose one and leave the other. I want fitrah, I do not want tabi'ah. So we need to establish first and foremost that while you are in this plane of existence, in this alien body, before you return home, you cannot separate these two natures. They are distinct, but they are like two sides of a coin. The two sides of a coin look very different, but you cannot separate them. If you separate them, they're no longer the same coin. So while you are in this body, you have to accept and acknowledge that. Why do we say this? Because if you look at the history of human beings as they strove to find spirituality and enlightenment, because they did not distinguish between tabi'ah and fitrah, and they simply talked of human nature, they tried to transcend human nature by plucking out tabi'ah from themselves, by saying, I do not want to have the desire for food. I do not want any sexual desire in my body. This has been the approach of some mystics in the past. And what we want to say is that this is impossible, because while you have a body, the body will demand its needs no matter what. If you deny it its demands, it will become perverse, it will change, it will skew, but it will still demand. The body is driven by tabi'ah, and tabi'ah, we said yesterday, has three motives. It wants to seek pleasure, it wants to flee from pain, and it wants to survive. And in order to survive, it must be selfish. Now let me give you some examples so we understand this clearly. What were the attempts in human history to remove and pluck this tabi'ah? Many of you here come from India, and I'm sure you have heard of such stories. In India, there are Hindu mystics or sages, some of whom are called yogis, for example. What they try and do is they try and torment their body in order to free it from physical desire. For example, they might dig a hole and bury themselves up to their necks and stay like that for days on end. What are they trying to do? A couple of weeks back, I was researching something on Sri Lanka. I think I was searching about Shias in Sri Lanka, what is their history and how they came to be there and so on. I came across some documentation and some video. You may know that in Sri Lanka for a long time they had a war between two factions. They had the Sinhalese and they had the Tamil Tigers, and they fought for a long time, and there was a brutal war in which many people died, lots of crimes, and there is still a trial of crimes against humanity. Now, there are some individuals who are from these Tamil Tigers who have now repented for the crimes they committed against humanity. In order to express their remorse and their repentance, what they do is every year they take a truck with a crane at the back, and from the crane there are iron hooks that hang. They remove their clothes, except for a loincloth, and they suspend themselves forward, and the hooks are put on their skin at the back. It is put into their backs and into their feet and into their hands at the back. Don't go searching for this video if you are faint of heart, because you will faint, okay? It suspends them with the hooks from their skin, their legs, their hands. And then they take iron skewers and they poke it through their cheeks from one side to the other and through their hands. And they then stay in that state with their hands clasped like that in worship. And as the truck moves from village to village and town to town through those bumpy, sandy roads, the crane bounces. And they are hooked with those iron hooks. So it throws them down and then it pulls them up. And it throws them down and it pulls it up. And when they're interviewed afterwards to say, why do you do this to yourself? They say, because this body has committed crimes against humanity. It has killed innocent children. So we are now making up for it by punishing this body, to teach it a lesson so that it does not do this again. And to show our true repentance. Now I can assure you that if a war broke out again, these same individuals will once again commit the same thing they will commit. Tell me why. Because what they are trying to do is to punish tabi'ah. Tabi'ah cannot comprehend things like justice, things like fairness, things like equity. This is for fitrah to understand, not for tabi'ah. And it is not just in this faith. Look at the history of monasticism amongst the Catholics, for example. In Catholicism, way back, maybe centuries ago, 19th century somewhere, some of the pious Catholics, priests, decided that the cause of our constantly committing sins and constantly succumbing to temptation is our sexual desire. We need to fight this. So in order to do this, we will abandon society, we will go into the desert, we will build a monastery, and we will say that marriage is a necessary evil. You should get married only if you just absolutely have to. But if God has inspired you with spirituality, and if you have the capacity to strive for higher ranks, and you wish to become like the angels, then you should not get married. And therefore celibacy became an integral part of being a monk. Several decades down, what is the result of that today? You keep hearing of stories of young boys being abused, young girls being abused in these monasteries. Why? Because again, it is an attempt to deny the body its need. It is unnatural to fight tabi'ah in this manner, because the body will demand what it wants. We sometimes have to adapt to different circumstances because of the society we live in, but the body will not stop for us. For example, in the past, our children got married at a younger age. Perhaps they got married when they were late teens, early 20s. Now, because mashallah, there is opportunities for education, they do their undergraduate, they do their graduate, they do their PhD, they study. So we wait, as if the body will wait. We say, let them get their PhD, let them get a good job, let them start earning 6 figures, let them establish themselves, and then they will get married. So we wait for our sons until they're in their 30s to get married. Trust me, their bodies is not waiting. Because you as a parent are neglecting it and thinking there is time, or because you and I have crossed an age where we have some sort of control of our desires, it does not change for a young man. He is going to Google on the internet and he is going to get into trouble because his body will still demand its needs. It is driven by tabi'ah, unless you have a unique child on your hands who has realized the importance of fitrah. So what we are trying to say here is that tabi'ah cannot be plucked from us. It cannot be taken out. It cannot be thrown out. You cannot say, because I want to become more pious, I'm going to starve my body and stop eating. Try it if you want. See how long it lasts. Nothing will give you as great an illusion as the first few hours of a diet. And then you begin to realize. Now, there is a difference between a person who might eat less or fast excessively because of his love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are incidents like this amongst the Anbiya, amongst the Aimah, amongst the Mu'mineen and the Ulama as well. That when they attain a certain rank of spirituality, because they completely disidentify from the physical body, and it is of much less importance to them, and there is a loss of interest in that, and they gain a certain amount of energy from spiritual sources, they don't have that sort of an appetite for food. This you and I can understand in a simple example, like when a young man falls in love with a girl. You will see that one of the signs of that falling in love is he loses his appetite. It is in similar terms, except that a mystic has fallen in love with Allah, and that is real love. So not eating or eating less out of a spiritual reason is something else. But to say, I will fight my body, and I will starve my body, and I will deny it food, that is not going to work. Because that is an attempt to punish tabi'ah, and tabi'ah will not accept that. So tabi'ah is not evil in itself. It is only evil when it becomes excessive. And we will talk, inshallah, of the relationship between fitrah and tabi'ah and how fitrah can harness and reign in tabi'ah.
Brother Khalil emphasizes that the body's instincts are not evil. They are essential for survival. The challenge is learning to channel them properly. Islam, as he explains, provides a balanced path, neither extreme indulgence nor denial, but moderation. Using vivid analogies, Brother Khalil compares sexual desire to a powerful river. If uncontrolled, it can cause destruction, but when guided by chastity and modesty, it becomes a force for love, family, and spiritual growth. The fitrah directs the energy of these instincts, making them constructive rather than harmful. Cultivating fitrah begins early in life. Children driven by instinct are often selfish, yet with guidance, these same forces can be transformed into responsibility, compassion, and virtue. Brother Khalil reminds us that it is easier to channel these forces early before they become uncontrollable. When nurtured, the instincts and desires that once seemed chaotic becomes a source of personal growth, spiritual insight, and social contribution.
And we will talk, inshallah, of the relationship between fitrah and tabi'ah and how fitrah can harness and reign in tabi'ah. If it is controlled and reined in, it is a good thing, it is not evil. And this is where Islam shows its beauty, how Islam is a moderate religion. Islam will not accept monasticism. Islam, on the other hand, will not accept excessive materialism. It will take a middle path. It will never ask you to do something that is unnatural to your physical body. And here is where we want to introduce the relationship between tabi'ah and fitrah. They are not actually equal forces. Why? Because tabi'ah is only temporary for the time that the body lives in this plane of existence. It disappears with the body. It does not have the maturity and the intelligence and the depth and the connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like fitrah does. Tabi'ah is like a gushing river. Fitrah is like a dam on that river that holds that gushing water and then releases it with control so that it generates useful power that is useful for itself and for mankind. Now let's take an example. We talked earlier on about the celibate, for example, and the idea of being pious by opposing desire. One of the strongest forces of tabi'ah after the force of the desire for food is the sexual desire in a human being. This can be compared to a raging force or a river that flows with force, and it is within that human being who becomes an adult. It gushes with that force. This is tabi'ah. When you build a dam of chastity, of modesty, of haya, of some shyness, it regulates this force and it directs it in the right manner. The result is that this same desire, which others have seen as evil and tried to crush, Islam now teaches you how, by using this fitrah, this dam of chastity and modesty, how you can use this force in the right direction. Now it becomes beautiful, because that individual now will seek a spouse, and then that individual will have a family. That individual will have children that will bring joy to him and his spouse. That individual will, in time, after being married for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, will learn to distinguish between lust and between love. It becomes a springboard and a means by which he evolves spiritually. That very same fitrah, if it was missing, if you remove that dam, now when this tabi'ah flows with force, it becomes now detrimental. It now becomes destructive. It now becomes ugly. It now causes harm. It now makes that person increasingly depraved. He goes from one desire to another, from one fantasy to another. The result of that is he harms himself spiritually and physically. Not only does he destroy himself, but he destroys other lives. Families are hurt. Children are hurt. The result of what? The result of uncontrolled tabi'ah. Now, we will, inshallah, dedicate one lecture talking about how to raise fitrah-oriented children. But let me just throw this out here, that the development of fitrah in children needs to start earlier rather than later. Why? Let us continue with this analogy of the river and the dam that we built. Most of you here have been to Niagara Falls. You have seen at Niagara Falls there is a river that gushes with force. And then that water falls down, that we all go and see. Subhanallah, an amazing sight. You can stand for hours and just look at that. And then once it falls, you notice the water doesn't have as much force down there. It flows, it goes winding through various cliffs. Where does it end up? It ends up in Lake Ontario. It opens up into a vast body of water, which is true for many rivers as well that flow with force. They end up opening up into a sea or an ocean. Where is the dam? It is way up on the river, where the water gushes with force. In other words, you stop and you catch that early. You don't let it go at the end. What if you decided that instead of building that dam at the river up there, we're going to build it in Lake Ontario? It is not going to have any effect because there is no force that is flowing there. Secondly, because now it has opened up to a large body of water. Can you imagine the size of that wall and that dam that you will have to build? In other words, it becomes a lot more difficult to accomplish such a task when you let it go so far. It is the same thing with our children. When they are young and when tabi'ah rages in them with force, that is where you put the wall of fitrah, so that it regulates and controls that tabi'ah and directs it so that it is useful for themselves and for society. If we leave it, once it has lost its force, it is then very difficult to build that wall of fitrah much later when they are much older.
Brother Khalil further illustrates that even the angels questioned Allah when He announced the creation of humanity, seeing only potential for chaos. But Allah knew the divine potential within each human being, the fitrah that allows for mercy, generosity, justice, and love. When awakened and guided, this spiritual self can shine, reflecting divine attributes in the world. Every act of courage, justice, or kindness is an expression of this inner potential.
This confusion between tabi'ah and fitrah, by the way, is not just something that confuses human beings. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended to create insan, even angels were confused about these two. If you look at Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2 of the Quran, verse 30, Allah tells us of the time when He wanted to create the first prototype of the human being, which was Nabi Adam alayhi salam. Before He did that, He said to the angels, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. And remember when your Lord said to the angels, I have decided that I shall create a representative of mine on this earth. What was the response of the angels? قَالُوا أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَنْ يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاءِ. Oh Allah, are you going to create a species that will create mischief on the earth and spill blood? What they're saying to Allah is, do you really want to do this? I mean, we're not saying anything, but we are there. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. Here we are, we celebrate your praise, we proclaim your sanctity. Why do you want to create this creature that has so much anger, so much lust within it, so much uncontrolled power? It's just going to run amok and create havoc. Now when you look at the world we live in, you just have to turn on the news. The angels were onto something, isn't it? Because we live in a mad, mad world, isn't it? How many times have you questioned humanity? How many times have you said, I wonder why Allah even bothered to create human beings? I mean, look at the things we do. Look at the stories you hear. A mother cutting her baby into pieces, people slaughtering each other. We just can't live in peace with each other, right? We have invented ways of torturing each other beyond anyone's comprehension, right? Our imagination is being used to create weapons of violence, of destruction. We pollute the environment, we kill, and then we try and fix things, and then we create a bigger mess, and right? Why did Allah bother? Allah says to them, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know something that you don't know. What is it Allah knows the angel does not know? I know that they have fitrah in them. You, the angels, when you look at the world, you are seeing 7 billion caterpillars. I am seeing the one caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. That one butterfly is so important to me. It is worth creating 7 mad, insane caterpillars to get that one butterfly. Allah knows the capacity, the potential of this human being. فَإِذَا نَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Oh angels, when I blow into this creature that you think is just mad and full of lust and anger and desire, full of tabi'ah only, when I blow into him of my spirit, then you fall into prostration before him. That spirit that I blow into him will have my attributes. I am Rahman, his fitrah will always call him towards mercy. I am Al-Jawad, his fitrah will always call him towards generosity. Look at your own nature. You will find that all those names that are Asma'ul Husna for Allah, the beautiful names of Allah, those are the qualities that you like within yourself. And their opposite is what you dislike, because it is wired in you. Even if you don't like studying, even if you do not want to go to school, even if you want to just remain the way you are, illiterate, if I call you ignorant, you do not like it. And if I call you intelligent and wise and knowledgeable, you are happy even though if you can't read and write. Because it is your nature to love Al-Alimu. If I call you strong, you feel good because it is in your nature to love Al-Qadiru. If I call you weak, you dislike it because it opposes Al-Qadiru. So within you is that potential. Within you is the ability to unleash attributes. If you can only control your tabi'ah with your fitrah, you become a mirror through which divine attributes shine on the rest of the universe. That is why Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says, أَتَزْعَمُ أَنَّكَ جُرْمٌ صَغِيرٌ وَفِي كَنْ طَوَى الْعَالَمُ الْأَكْبَرُ. Do you think you are some small, insignificant life germ in this universe when within you is contained the entire universe? You are a microcosm of the macrocosm. The whole universe is contained within you. You are so weak compared to other creatures. Look at the animals around you. They are bigger, they are stronger, they are faster. They can devour you in seconds. But look at your ability to understand. You can explore the outer limits of the space. You can go to the bottoms of the ocean. You can do amazing surgeries. You can rescue these other massive creatures. They have remained the same for centuries. Look at how you have changed. Your potential. That if we take up this challenge, and inshallah before we die, if we evolve from this caterpillar state to this butterfly state, to this fitrah-oriented individuals, then the change is so radical, even though outwardly we may appear to be the same, but the change is so radical that it would be like looking at 2 different species and not believing that these 2 species were once one and the same, which is why we're giving that example of the caterpillar and the butterfly.
In this second series, Brother Khalil calls us to awaken the inner butterfly within. By harmonizing our earthly instincts with our higher spiritual nature, we allow the soul to rise above survival-driven impulses. The transformation, he explains, is radical. Outwardly, we may appear the same, but inwardly, we evolve from a caterpillar state into a butterfly, our fitrah fully activated, guiding our lives toward virtue, consciousness, and closeness to Allah. Thus, under Brother Khalil Jaffer's guidance, Series 2 encourages us not to deny the self, nor to indulge it recklessly, but to integrate our physical and spiritual natures. With sincere intention, O Allah, show me who I truly am and guide me to become the person you want me to be. We can gradually awaken the butterfly within, transforming our hearts, our actions, and our entire being. Thank you for watching. Let's make a difference together. If this video inspired you, hit like, follow, and share it with others. Your support helps spread knowledge and positivity, building a community where we all grow. Every like, follow, and share makes an impact. Let's keep the momentum going.